It's Talking Baseball Australia. It's baseball updates you'll really love. The MLB and ABL news you want. With Paul Morgan and Dan Vaughn. It's baseball's best mate all year round. From the batter's box to the mound.
Well, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Talking Baseball Australia Live. Baseball's best man, Dan Vaughn. Oops. There we go. We are really going on a huge limb here, partner. There he is, his Blue Jays hat. I'm here in my non-Blue Jays hat. We are connecting dots that we normally do. We usually I'm in my studio in Dallas. He's in his studio in Perth. Well, he's in Perth, but I'm actually in Rio Vista, Texas, which is about an hour and 15 minutes southwest of Dallas. And I'm at a high school basketball tournament, been calling basketball all day. And before my final game, we slide on here for the show. So good morning to you, sir.
Good morning to you, David. So is that heading towards San Antonio way, or is that?
It would be about an hour south of maybe 45 minutes south of Fort Worth. So yeah, I'd be going south toward Austin, eventually, Waco, eventually San Antonio, or Austin, then San Antonio. So yes, we're not too far off I-35.
And the real reason you're heading that way is, I assume, is you're just trying to get your Texas Longhorns kit ready for their run at the national title. Which
no, probably not. Regrettably, I'm actually going tomorrow, just to pull the curtain back. We're going to Atlanta to watch Penn State play Ole Miss in the Peach Bowl. My wife and I are, so I'm gonna move back a little bit. But we do this time of year, holiday, obviously, like it is in Australia, to kind of tell you what was going on. It's the time where a lot of the high school basketball teams get extra games in. So you're in a situation right now where your district play, which is your conference or league, it doesn't start for a couple more weeks. School's out, so you get these school tournaments, and you've got, I guess, about 12 teams or so playing over 2 days. It's pretty competitive, and you wind up having a chance to get your game, just to get games in, because you're not in school. So you don't have that distraction. So the kids can get a lot more work in, and it's always a big deal. These holiday tournaments happen at Thanksgiving and at Christmas here in the States, so that's what we're doing here. But we're here talking baseball Australia. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I've got one more basketball question before we talk baseball. So March Madness obviously happens for colleges to crown the national champ. When does the national high school sort of grand finales finish in the States?
Around March. In the state of Texas, for example, the girls play a week before the boys, and they'll be there's every classification from the smallest school, which they call Class A, to 6A is the highest enrollment. It's not by enrollment, and usually town size too. But obviously the bigger cities have bigger schools. But they start usually in middle March, and by the last weekend of March is when they crown the state champions. In most cases, though, there are a couple of states where it goes a little longer, but Texas gets them done when their district play starts next week for the girls, 2 weeks for the boys, and by end of March, you've got by the time you get to 1st of April, you got a state champion. So this is going to be a real quick pace from the next 3 months, and it's about 3 weeks before the colleges. So, but it's that time of year down here. It's over here. It's basketball time, and everybody's playing. Everybody's rolling on along.
Well, that sounds good to me. Now we better move on to baseball, David.
Yes. So round number 7's upon us, and I have 2 questions for us today, really 3. here on Talking Baseball Australia Live. What should be done about rainouts? I don't know if we can do anything about them, but is there any way we can sort of circumvent that going forward? I don't know if we have an answer for that. And then I want to know who you got the rest of the way. Who you guys got? Who is the team du jour the rest of the way? And then, of course, who you buying or selling in that situation. And then on the back end, I'm going to ask Paul a question that I've been wanting to ask him for a while here. But what sport in Australia can we learn most from for our great game of baseball? So there we go. That's what we got the show here rolling around 7. Paul always starts off with his biggest takeaway for round number 6. Paulie, what was your biggest takeaway from last week in the Australian Baseball League?
I think I watched a fair bit of that Melbourne-Brisbane series. I think my biggest takeaway was, you talk about who we've got for the rest of the way. We've talked on the show numerous times about the Aces and are they going to be the team that we think they're going to be? Are they going to get? And I thought they very much answered that question. And I thought that, watching the Perth-Adelaide series relatively closely and then watching the Melbourne-Brisbane, to me, the biggest takeaway was the Aces are absolutely, I think now, as sort of Adelaide with that breakaway leader, I think now as we kind of round the turn heading for home, round 7, that's a big series, Melbourne-Adelaide. And I almost think that Melbourne now perhaps has their nose in front as the best team going forward. That's my big takeaway from round 6. How about you, DV?
Yeah, I would echo that. I thought what Perth did in Adelaide was impressive. I mean, granted, they're going to be a little different team going forward, but I thought what they did in Adelaide, anytime you go on the road, the team that's the champion until you beat them and knock them off in the end, and winning 3 or 4 there in Adelaide at South Beach was a big deal. I thought that was the biggest deal. And I thought that, a lot like you really got 4 teams that you could right now you could draw out of a hat, and that'd be Adelaide, Brisbane, Perth, and Melbourne, and you could draw one of those teams out of a hat, and that's your team the rest of the way, and you'd feel pretty good about it. I mean, you've got a 1 in 4 chance of the mathematics of it, but all 4 teams, the ones we just talked about, they look pretty solid. And granted, Sydney had some help coming late, but I think it's a little bit too late. But as far as those 4, I think it's going to be a delicious finish. And really, I just, and we talked about it too. It wouldn't shock us if Adelaide had swept. Wouldn't shock us if Perth had swept. But Andy Kyle did what Andy Kyle I expected him to do, which was have his guys ready to play in a series that perhaps has catapulted Perth to the conversation where they were sort of in the conversation, but now much in the conversation with Melbourne, Brisbane, and of course Adelaide, who was still the champion until otherwise. So I think we're both right there. Similar reasons, though, but in case you missed it last week, I thought Perth made a statement win, perhaps for them. I don't recall a series that Perth played. I guess the Brisbane series in the playoffs last year was as impressive as that one was this weekend. Your thoughts on Perth and Adelaide?
I thought I was very confident that the Heat would go in and win that series. I just felt that they were, and I think now there's been some major dominoes come off the board to change their fate moving forward. But going into that series, I thought they were as good as they've been all year. And to me, they were the team. I thought they could easily. I actually thought they would win that series quite comfortably, which they did in the end. Hayakawa obviously leaving now back to Japan is enormously challenging for the Heat. Now, Tucker Smith off the roster this week is huge as well from a Canberra point of view. But look, I thought they were playing really good baseball going into that Adelaide series. As I said, and we said on the show, to me, I thought they were a good chance to win it. They won it. Hugely impressive. And it'll be interesting to see how they go from here. Like, I think they've got a good nucleus still. They probably need to see what they're going to do with that third starter role. But outside of that, I think, to your point, I think they're absolutely in the conversation.
Yeah, big series tonight. I can't think of one. There was a series, oh gosh, maybe the year that Mike Brosseau and Jake Fraley were going to get in 17-18, where they went to Melbourne and won the first series. Maybe that is as impressive as that one was, but I just think that was pretty impressive just because of who it was, who you're playing, where you're playing, and really what each team had to gain and lose from it. The other thing, Sydney and Canberra, I put down my notes here, treading water. We talked about this last week, was an opportunity and we both, I think, called a split here, but those two teams split and really treaded water when you need a series win. As Canberra plays on the West this week, Sydney, you thought a series win would help them. It really didn't. All it did was take days off the counter. Although it was an entertaining series, I thought the offensive onslaught in Game 1 for Canberra was impressive. Sydney and there was a walk-off tossed in there as well, I believe. Sydney's got a little bit of new life. Offensively, they found a little bit of punch from the kid from Kansas City that came in with the Monarchs. But in general, I just wrote down on my notes, treading water. That's what they did. They treaded water, and that's a difference. That's kind of what happened. I mean, you don't really. I didn't come out feeling any better about either team going the distance after that series.
And look, I'm with you, and I think this week when you cast your mind forward, and Canberra 7-16. Tough road trip for them to come over here. Obviously, they're playing tonight, tomorrow, and a double dip Saturday. And again, it's that Melbourne. I mean, it can't be understated from Perth's point of view of how huge the series is for Perth. Because if they win that series, I think they're probably sitting on top of the standings going into round 8. I think if they win the series 3-1, if they potentially sweep the series. I think if they sweep the series, that's for sure. I think they end up sitting on top of the standings going into round 8, which would be, enormous with 12 games. I think from your point of view with Canberra, look, they've got a couple of people off the right. They've got obviously a couple of people that are still, doing incredibly well, and that they're a team that's reasonably hard to sort of gauge where they are. But I think from a point of view of Corey Acton, who's putting together that little bit for Canberra to potentially take the MVP. I mean, he could go mad this week. It's and the ABL sort of noted it in their preview. Someone who really has had a slow start is Alex Hall, but Alex Hall got hot pretty quickly last week in Adelaide, and if Tim Kennelly and his game 400 tonight, so that's huge as well. And take a moment to acknowledge game 400 for Tim Kennelly tonight, and then if Alex Hall can get hot as well, then who knows where this team goes? And Bogarski's back in the lineup, so it should be an interesting series over here anyway, DV.
No doubt. I also would, and I wrote down too with this whole Melbourne-Brisbane series. It was a higher stakes treading water because really they both the split, I guess, in the case that Brisbane didn't win the series, but there was no, to me, I mean, granted, those two teams basically slugged even there. I mean, that's pretty much what I thought, just at a higher stakes level. It sets up this great run here in January, and I do think that again, we've talked about Brisbane at home. What they're built for that ballpark, but Melbourne played well in that ballpark as well. Showed some pop. Bird was outstanding again. Just a beast in that ballpark, and then some.
Yeah, I think that stadium played better for Melbourne, I think, than it did Brisbane. And again, I think that series, to me, I walked away watching that series and thinking that, okay, well, this is the Melbourne Aces that we've thought that they could be, and this is the Melbourne Aces that they are. And to me, I walked away from that series going, all right, this weekend, Adelaide had a bad series, but does that mean they'll bounce back? But to me, I thought, boy, that Melbourne in that ballpark looks lethal. And I think their long ball and they've got a better long ball game than anyone in the league. And I still think that at this point in the season, if you're a person who enjoys a punt, the Aces would be the team that I think I'd be backing.
Yes, I think that they but they've shown us that they're the Aces that you and I have talked about. We've talked about it at length here. That what kind of ball club would they be? Would they be because we waited all last summer and last winter, and they finally did become that Aces team that we talked about. And I without going too far down the rabbit hole today, they have perhaps the most complete package overall of teams as far as pitching, bullpen, and the numbers tell you that right across the board. They're right across the board, right even there. That's a look at last week, though, in round number 6. The show is Talking Baseball Australia Live. We're baseball's best mate, Dan Vaughn, Paul Morgan, with you. As I want to, before we get to predictions, the weather's come to play more than it has lately. I mean, I know it's not so much. We've had weather issues, right? You can't do the thing about it. You can't do about Mother Nature, right? We know this, right? We know that if it rains and you get a rain out, there's nothing you can do about it, right? I get that, but and this came up a couple times in a couple different posts I saw here and there from some of the fan sites were what can be done, because what you don't want to happen, and this is what I worry about, you're going to wind up with a potential. I see it. I hope it doesn't happen, but where a team plays fewer games than another team and maybe has a better percentage, or one team plays more than the other, has one more loss, and then you're going to lose the home field or whatever the case may be. And I know the way the league's structured, you can't really structure rainouts. The way a rainout would work in the States, for example, in the American Association, let's say Kansas City's playing Sioux City, you get a rainout where you play the next time the two teams play. Right, that's the way it works. If it's the last game of the series, play the next time you guys play there. If there's not a series there, you play the next time you play at home. If there's not a series there, then you don't play at all. Well, those mechanisms aren't built in, because if it's the last time Sydney and Canberra play, well, you're not going to play again. They're not going to make that game up. So, is it fair to just add a win here, a win there, or would you rather see the whole percentage thing stay in play and you play the games that are brought to you?
Look, I think you have to play the percentage game, in my opinion. I think it's, but obviously there's teams that win and lose through that. And I was just having a quick look this week. We got games scheduled in Melbourne, Sydney, and Perth. Now, if you look at the days that these games are scheduled, it's the cricket at the moment. Australia are playing Test match cricket in Pakistan in Melbourne. It's rain delay at the moment in the cricket. So Melbourne's dicey. Melbourne's got a question mark on it for tonight. Sydney's weather looks dicey for the entire weekend. So Sydney's weather looks like it could be a real issue this weekend. The only solution, the only logical solution I have, DV, is because the weather in Perth is fine for the whole weekend. Is you play all the games in the West, but that's about the only solution we can come up with. But it's the only field in the world where the tarps are actually on the field. So so look, I don't know. I think you have to play. I think you've got yourself on mute, DV, as well. But you've got. Oh, no, you've lost your volume, DV. You've still lost your volume, DV. You've got a slight volume issue. So here we go. But yeah, outside of that, I think it's more hard to say. But you have to just go to the percentage game. But if you go to the percentage game, there's obviously going to be winners and losers. There you go.
There we go. Sorry about that. That was me. What I was going to tell you too was Perth is the only ballpark that I know now. Outdoor ballpark. I don't know about it. Indoor, obviously. It's the only outdoor ballpark in the world that doesn't need a tarp. It had a tarp, but the tarp was placed behind the fence. When they did pull the tarp a couple of years ago, I believe you were there were holes rotten in it because rats and snakes and rodents had eaten the thing alive. They don't even have the tarp on the other side of the fence. It was actually rolled up and put behind a fence that you couldn't get it over. It's the only park in the world that doesn't need a tarp. It always amazed me that you don't need a tarp in Perth. And I remember the first time I was there, I remember looking at you and I remember walking up going, where's the tarp? And they're like, well, we have one, mate, but it's behind this fence. We never use it. And they did unroll it a couple of years ago, and it looked like Swiss cheese. But other than that, it was it's a crazy thing. No tarp there. It's always amazed me.
No, it's very much, pretty much. You'd sort of rely on in Perth, kind of come from that November to March. It might rain once or twice, but that'll be about it. So,
well, let's go to question number 2. Who you buying? Who you selling? I'll go first. Who am I buying? Who am I selling? Gosh, this is the one that I I will say this, but before I go too far, I wish John Wiley had been with the Blue Sox from the get-go, right? The kid that had a big series with Sydney. I'd like to have seen him just one bat, maybe. I'm not saying that's. I think he's good for 3 more wins along the way, maybe 4 during the regular season. So I will throw that out there, but I'm not buying them because it's too much to make up. I'm with you to a degree. I am buying Melbourne. I am buying the Aces and their whole balance. I'm selling Perth not because I don't want Perth to win, but until Perth finds another starter. They had a 1-2 punch, and without that number 2 punch, starting pitching is huge in this thing. We saw it last year. We've seen it going to the Claxton Shield. You got to have pitching. You just took out, I think, the best arm in the league. So I'm buying Melbourne, and I'm selling Perth, but I hate to sell them because you don't want to sell them short. But until they find an arm, now granted that arm may be there, who you buying, who you selling? Don't hate me, Perth.
No, I couldn't sell Perth. I'll be running out of town. So I'm buying Melbourne, and I'm selling Adelaide. I don't know that they're as good as they were. It's not. I think they can still easily win the Claxton Shield, and I could. But for right now, I thought that when I watched Melbourne series and I watched Adelaide series, and yes, Adelaide had an off series, no doubt, and they'll be better for it. I just, to me, I just felt Melbourne filled me with confidence just as an observer. Look, Perth filled me with a lot of confidence as well. But I think, to your point, I think with Hayakawa gone and also Tucker Smith off, there's going to be a lot of stress on that pen this week. And yes, you got to find that third starter. You got to find that starter, and who is that starter going to be? So there's a question mark on them. Not as many question marks on Melbourne. Also not, but I felt that was was it a bad series for Adelaide, or has sort of have a couple of guys sort of, has the league figured them out a bit? I don't know, but I'd be buying Melbourne, and at this point selling Adelaide.
And I will say this about Perth: I'm allowed to amend this only from the standpoint of if there is a signing or a free agent pitcher added that's added, an ace type guy, then I might be totally, again. I mean, if they add a starting pitcher, I'm going to be I would change my mind. I'm just saying if a Mike Ekstrom type or I'm not saying Ekstrom, but a Dylan Unsworth, that's those kind of guys over the years. If that ace type arm shows up, I feel a little different.
And I think a lot will happen to be, I think a lot of that will be dependent on what happens this weekend. I think, if they split with Canberra or drop the series, probably the season, you would think the quest for the Shield is probably questionable with what they've got to come. But if they sweep this series, I think they got a real shot at this thing. I mean, they've got, what have they got? They got Brisbane on the road. I think they got Sydney on the road and Melbourne at home to finish off. So, I think depending on the series, I think whether they become, I think again, if the series goes poorly, they probably sit on their hands and probably think, let's rebuild for next year. But I think if they sweep the series, you're right. I mean, I'm sure there's someone out there that's hot and ready to go as a starter.
Well, I know they've made the phone calls. I know they will. But again, you got 4 teams. You draw. And then into those top 4 teams, if they were given to me as a lottery pick and I had a 1 in 4 chance, I feel pretty good. But again, I just like what Melbourne's done. But again, I have right to amend that should the Heat grab an extra arm, because they need an arm or someone from the bullpen to step in, and they're going to be working on that. There's some conversations that are going on about that, so it should be very interesting. Show is Talking Baseball Australia, where baseball's best made. Paul Morgan's in Perth. I'm in Rio Vista, Texas. Yes, looking up on a map, you're like going, where is that? That's where I'm at. But we're glad you're along here on the show. Here's where we talk round number 7. We've already kind of dove in a little bit here. Let's start with Brisbane and Sydney. I think this is a great spot for Brisbane. Sydney, of course, being home, but I think it's a great spot for Brisbane in a sense that Sydney, is sort of running out of time. Brisbane could possibly pull the plug on them with a win here. I also think Brisbane needs to turn their fortunes away from Queensland, and I think this is a great opportunity for them. I'm going only, and this is only for me. I'm going in this series with Brisbane and Sydney that Brisbane has not really played great in the road, and Sydney's sort of played in the middle. And this is one of those, chum in the water type situations. Brisbane can really put themselves in a top 3 spot with a series win. And I just think, you saw Brisbane firsthand 2 weeks ago. It was close. It was close. This is a lot different animal than playing Perth. In Sydney, it's an easier trip. I think Brisbane's got a really good chance to win 3 games here.
Yeah, I agree. I think, and look, the biggest thing for me for Brisbane as well, probably the one thing that sticks out bigger than anything is they're the only team that don't have massive changes to their team week on, week out. In fact, they've got no changes to their team week in, week out, while every other team has a mountain of changes just based on a lot of the Korean and Japanese players leaving. But Brisbane have a very settled lineup. And, I think to be, and look, the young guy, and the ABL done a great preview this week as well. And by the way, DV, big thanks to the ABL as well. I don't know if you've seen this, but if you look at the round 7 preview, they've also got there under the ABL schedule. They've got our friends Danny Vaughan Jr. and Paul Morgan run a podcast, not affiliated with the ABL, but they've given us a link to the show as well. So how about that, DV? But yeah, I think Brisbane are the pretty set in this series. I think Sydney a lot of changes.
By the way, I do appreciate. By the way, I appreciate the ABL what they're doing, supporting us. We're doing some things behind the scenes with them as well. I do appreciate them acknowledging us, and we're trying. The one thing that's a challenge for us on this show is we're in different parts of the world right now, and we were in the same part of the world, a little different story. We're a little easier for us, but our time can be a little sometimes inconsistent, but it will be back to normal hopefully next week. So again, I do appreciate them for the support. Adelaide is I'm going to go back to Canberra because Adelaide Melbourne to me is the marquee of the weekend. Canberra Perth, I will be interested to see, and I think you've already mentioned it, how Perth addresses the pitching staff outside of Beardsley. I'll be interested to see how that works out. He's been really, really good. Canberra has had some decent starting pitching here and there. But again, I think they have the same problem a lot of folks have. It's still thin. Everybody's a little thin this time of year. You're losing players left and right. But Canberra's a last stand. This is one of those situations where Canberra has to have a series win. The pressure is all on Canberra. They got to win the series. Perth, I think, has put themselves in the top 4. Now, they can also put themselves in number 1. But I go from a pressure standpoint in this series that Canberra is really, this is kind of the last stand. They've got to win a series on the road to solidify any type of run the last 3.5, 4 weeks. It's got to be now. Perth has really played themselves back into what scares me about the Heat over the years, where they seem to be clicking on all cylinders like they did in those salad years. I think this one just overall, and what we haven't talked about enough is Perth's ability to score runs. And Perth right now is it came in the series, and I dropped my sheet here, but they were number 1 with runners in scoring position. I believe they still are. They've been lethal when runners are aboard, and that's been key for them offensively in that ballpark. There's something about being in the West and being at home, and over the years, their numbers are phenomenal home. I just think that this is Canberra's last chance, and I think Perth, much like Brisbane, feels the opportunity here.
Yeah, and I think something that to note as well with Perth, and we talked about this at the start, where everything was going disastrously for Perth. Remember that relievers ERA was nudging 6 or something along those lines. Now back down to 3.66. Canberra's starters at its 6.42 and their relievers at 5.27. That's worse than the league in both those categories. So their arms haven't been there. But to your point as well, DV, that the Heat have kind of found the bats at the right point with runners in scoring position, as you say. Long ball hasn't been their friend, nor has it really been Canberra's friend either. So when you dissect the numbers, you kind of think this goes Perth's way, but yeah, I think to your point, Canberra kind of come over here. This is last chance highway. This is last chance saloon. This is like it's win or basically pack her up for the year for the Cavs, and I think that I think that's a dangerous team, and if you're Perth, that's a very dangerous team to feel. The Heat had their traditional boat party, I believe, the other day. We know they've always done well after that Christmas boat party, and the runs have flowed after that. But I think it'll be an interesting series. I don't think it'll be I think it'll be a really tight series. I think Perth probably get the jump tonight with Beardsley, and that probably allows them to win the series. But I think there'll be some nervous moments in the West.
Yeah, and there's one thing you can always fix a bullpen easier than a rotation. And I think what a lot of folks want to fix the rotation first. Well, Perth fixed the bullpen, and by fixing the bullpen, have gotten strength as a pitching staff overall, and actually helped their starting rotation when Kyle was there, striking out record numbers. That takes care of itself. But the bullpen has been solidified, and I think I'm right. And you look at those numbers from back at Thanksgiving here in the States, you flip them, Canberra and Perth are totally different, and those numbers have been cut in half. And I think that just spells good things for Perth. As we go to Talking Baseball Australia, baseball's best mate, our prediction time here as we are in the end of our predictions. Adelaide in Melbourne, this is the marquee matchup. This one could very easily be for the Shield in a month's time or so. You want to dissect this one first?
I think this is probably I think it'd be. I do think this is probably your Claxton Shield preview right here. Look, I think Melbourne are the hotter of the two. Saying that, can Adelaide get back to their form at the start of the year? I think Adelaide have probably got Melbourne at the wrong time. I think this is every team. We've seen it every year. Every team ebbs and flows and slumps a little bit, and I think Adelaide are probably in the tail end of their slump. But I think it's not a bad thing, because I think if they can sort of come back and sort of fight for those last three rounds, they'll be fine. But I think they've got Melbourne at the wrong time. I think the Aces have played themselves into beautiful amounts of form. They're back at home. I think Glenn Denning's having a blinding season. I think he's going to play even better. That Greg Bird, I think, is going to start depositing more souvenirs to right field. I just think that I think from a pitching point of view, yes, you got the two best pitching. You got the Aces are second in ERA for starters. They're first for relievers. Adelaide are first for starters, second for relievers. So there's nowhere you've got. And then when you look at all the hitting numbers, you got similarities all around the board. For me, I think this is a Melbourne 3-1 series win. But I think what will happen is the Giants will come back in a bit of form towards the back end of this series and put them in good stead. But I think Melbourne at home, hard to go against.
Yeah, I love your ebbs and flows, because I've seen this in the American Association where teams, and Adelaide's not playing bad. They lost a series. You can still play good and lose a series. But I think you're catching Melbourne at their rise, and maybe Adelaide's coming out of it. Now, what Adelaide looks like in 3 weeks' time, maybe totally different. But I'm with you. They're at home. Melbourne is they got a great atmosphere there. I'd forgotten. I'm watching their last home series. They've got a really good atmosphere there. We talk about Canberra's atmosphere quite a bit at first, but they're going to be ready to go. They're Victoria. They're ready to go. They feel like it's their time to get back in it. I just think from a fan's perspective, the Aces did lose, as Stuart's telling us. He says that Aces lost 4 MVB players, picked up 2, have lost Matt Beattie to Canberra. They're vulnerable. They are. But I just think that Paul's pitching metaphor is spot on. I think this series winds up being a split, much like Adelaide and Brisbane last week. And if you're Adelaide, I'm saying Melbourne. Pardon me. Melbourne and Brisbane last week. I think this is much like a split. I think it'll be a great series. I think it'll be nip and tuck. But I think they'll come away 2-2 is my call. So I got Perth 3-1, I got Brisbane 3-1, and I got 2-2 there in Victoria. But again, I do think you're right on, though. Pitching will be outstanding. Both lineups are pretty deep. Now, granted, yes, you're missing some pieces 1 through 9. But I love your analogies. I've seen it before where teams in that red hot streak, and they're still playing well, and eventually it's going to cool for you. But I like your thinking, but I'm still going to go 2-2.
Yeah, I think it could go either way, and to Stuart's point as well. We mentioned this earlier in the show. There's a whole host of changes. There's more ins and outs this week than there's been for a long time. So the whole thing's up in the air.
This is always the case. The Christmas and New Year's stretch. And I remember years gone by where all the Japanese players were gone across the league, and there's been years like that where Melbourne reloaded in a couple of years. One Claxton Shield when they brought in Nate Sampson that one year for the American Association. There's been a lot of reloading. Teams have done it. Trying to think of some of the others that have come. There's been a lot. I mean, there've been several different cases where Carl Prime came in for Perth one year and had a real monster month. There's been those type of additions because that's the time guys either hit the wall, or by major league standards or by Nippon standards, they're held in check. They got to cut down the workload, and so that usually opens up opportunities. So yeah, it's a lot of changes, more so than any week during the ABL season. Here on Talking Baseball Australia. I'm going to skip to the final question before we get out of here because I'm just a clock a bit. I want to ask you something because you've talked about this a little over the years and what we can learn. Now, we talk about what we can learn in the States. Obviously, you can go down and sit down in a class at King County, Illinois, and learn from the King County Cougars. You go to the St. Paul Saints and learn from them, or Frisco Rough Rider, whoever. You can learn with the front offices of these minor league teams in the States, and you can learn things from the NFL, the NBA, or whatever. But I want to get your thought. What league or sporting code can we learn from as a league in Australia? Who's out there that we need to say, you know what they're doing, we got to try to do in some form or fashion?
Look, I've said it before, and I'll continue to say it. I think the ABL needs to work closely with the NBL Basketball League. I think what they've done, obviously 2 North American sports, and on top of that, like 2 sports that were big in the 90s. And there was a time where the Perth Wildcats and the Perth Heat and the original, when I was a kid, the original, there was a time that Greg Jelks was the biggest sports star in this town. I mean, cans of Coke had the Heat on them. The Heat were the biggest team in town. This was before 2020 cricket and all those things. But to me, you look at NBL basketball again, and I've said it before many times on this show. 10 years ago, they were sort of in a pretty. I actually thought baseball, when baseball came back to town with MLB's backing, I actually thought they were probably ahead of NBL at a time. NBL had no TV deal. They were kind of a bit of a mess. The only team that sort of, the stadium deals weren't really quite there. But, the biggest advantage that NBL has over baseball is obviously you can just throw them into an arena and away you go. So the location is going to be better. But I just think from a junior perspective, basketball has I think, where the NBL has gone better than the ABL, in my opinion, is I think they've just had better ties to the NBA. And I think, people love NBA basketball, but there's no reason why people can't love Major League Baseball or NPB or KBO. But I just don't think the job is done that well here. And I think that's, you've got all these eyeballs at NBA, and then you've got guys like Melo Ball as a guy playing for the Wildcats who they reckon is going to go pick 2 in the NBA draft. They've done that Rising Stars program. They've done all this. And we look at to me, I look at what the Heat's done this year with Hayakawa and go, hey, this is the first time in Perth anyway that we've had a legitimate star. And this kid could very well easily be the next Yamamoto or whoever from Japan. And in 5 years' time, we could see this kid signing with the Yankees or whoever for $200+ million. And I just think that, the NBL has done a better way at telling the story. They've done a better way at entertaining the fans. They're not overly profitable. That's still an issue for sure in that league. But I just think they got their TV deal right. I think they got their venues right. And I think they've just done that razzle dazzle to entertain fans. And, I still, and yes, this is a biased opinion, but I go to a lot of sporting events. And I'll just say in Perth anyway, in Perth, like an Optus Stadium is a great stadium. The two best sporting events in Perth, in my opinion, are the Perth Heat and the Western Force Rugby, the way that they present their game. Now, probably on the lower end of attendance scales are the Western Force Rugby and the Perth Heat. But to me, I think baseball's got such a great story to tell, but we just, again, don't tell it as well as we could. And NBL have done a great job, and they've done a great job having that nice little pairing between Australians and Americans as well from a broadcasting point of view. You know, they've got the buy-in from America. You know, they've done everything that I think baseball should do. So, I think in a perfect world, if you're putting your board together for the ABL or you look, if there's a role in the executive, I think they need to go and get someone from NBL to kind of go, hey, this is what we did, this is how we got there, and this is what we're doing. And I think that, you know, the biggest thing that the ABL needs to do more than anything is you know, figure out what we're doing from a broadcast standpoint. Yes, it's fragmented at the moment. Perth is good in terms of this streamer, which is not maybe good for Unified, but because it's part of a bigger TV network, they're getting more articles in the newspaper, more clips on the Channel 7 News, etc., etc. But yeah, I think NBL is the blueprint, DV, anyway.
That's some awesome stuff. Well, we blew through it. I got basketball to do here in a few minutes, and we'll be back next week. And then there's our New Year's graphic right there. We'll give it right there to you in just a moment. But parting words, I think you nailed it, man. I think you nailed it right there. And have a great broadcast tonight. They can find you on Streamer, right?
Absolutely, and we will find me on Streamer, and Matt, we'll jump on the podcast for sure. Anytime, send us an invite, we'll be there. So enjoy your hoops, DV.
I got the hoops on the podcast. The podcast will be up in a couple of hours, and all good. But partner, I'll see you next week.
See you, DV.
All right, best to your family as well. Happy New Year to you, Paul Morgan, right there from Perth. Again, we say it every time. Let's be better fans tomorrow or today. Let's show more love tomorrow or today going forward in 2023 and 4 around the quarter. There's your reminder next week. There's our times right there. Baseball's best mate as we come your way from both corners of the globe. And we'll look at round 8 for the Australian Baseball League right there. Thanks for stopping by. For Paul Morgan, I'm Dan Vaughn. Glad you're watching us on replay or listening to us on our podcast. Thank you. Thank you for being a part of what we're doing at Talking Baseball Australia. Hope your team wins. Let's roll the close. I'll see you next time, everybody.
Cracker Jacks. I don't care if I ever get back for its root. Root for the Perth. If they don't win, it's a shame. For it's 1, 2, 3 strikes, you're out at the old ball game. Let's get some runs. Get some runs. Get some runs. Get some runs. What, Tom? Get some runs. Let's get some runs, boys. Let's get some runs, boys.